Okay, hello and welcome to this Women in Racing webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We have a stellar lineup, which I will get to introducing very shortly. But obviously, this webinar is where we are marking International Women's Day. And this year's theme is Inspire and Inclusion. And hopefully, with today's panel, that's exactly what we are going to do. We're going to be celebrating women in our sport, putting ideas forward for the future, and just opening up a pretty relaxed discussion with the four ladies who join me today. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Vanessa Royal. I work for Sky Sports Racing, branded jacket, proper company woman and everything. And if you're wondering why I'm sat by a bar, it's because I'm actually at Newcastle Racecourse, ready to broadcast a little bit later today for Sky. But enough about me. I've actually been helped hugely by women in racing in the past. I very kindly got a bursary from them. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. That really helped me with my career and a few other pointers along the way as well. So I'm delighted to be able to sit here and chair this webinar, as I said, with these four ladies. Let's get stuck straight in, shall we, and introduce everyone. I will start with Eileen Hart. Eileen, many people I'm sure on this webinar will already know you, will already have seen you with your involvement with women in racing, but let's kick off with you and we'll just do quick bios, everyone, before we get our discussion underway. So Eileen, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Yes, I will. Well, thanks for having me. And I've been in the industry for 30 years. So quite a while. And I came across women in racing early on when they were just setting up and sat on the committee, which was wonderful. And just loving being here. I love the motto for today, inspire inclusion, and I'm looking forward to interesting conversations around the table with everyone and to give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm up to now.
Terrific. We will get to that very, very shortly. Ellenas PhD, you are up next. Please introduce yourself.
So hi, I'm Ellenas. I'm the Chief Exec of the Scottish Racing Academy during the day. I'm also the newly appointed chair of the Diversity in Racing Advisory Group. I've held lots of different positions within the sport, and most recently my PhD was published in December, which was looking at experiences of young women within our sport. So
which I'm very much looking forward to discussing with you, Ellenas. I was reading your little bio we got sent, and I was like, oh, way to make me feel inadequate. She's a real go-getter, this one. So looking forward to you expanding on that PhD. Kate Clayton-Hathaway, you're up next, please. Short bio.
Hi, thanks, Vanessa. Good to be here today. Really excited to hear what everyone's got to say. So I've been involved with women in racing since 2015 and led on the very first piece of research within the industry that was all about diversity. I also led on the follow-up piece of work, which was Racing Home, which we focus much more on kind of parenthood, particularly motherhood, and the impact that might have on racing careers. And I'm really looking forward to working some more with everybody going forward. We've got lots of ideas coming out of that research, and really looking forward, as I said, to hear what everyone's got to say today. And hopefully, I can make a contribution from the kind of research perspective. Just to say very quickly, I'm an associate researcher at Oxford Brookes University, and my general specialism is around gender and structures and organizational structures, so I can bring that kind of perspective to what we talk about.
Yeah, we might dip into that first, really, in the discussion point. But before we do, let's say hello to Charlotte Jones. Jockey, of course, has joined us on her way to air, and she does have to drop off at about 1 o'clock. So we'll be leaning on Charlotte a little bit before then saying goodbye. Charlotte, thank you so much for stepping in. How are you over there?
Hi, I'm okay, thank you. My name's Charlotte Jones. I'm a national hunt jockey. I also hold a first class degree in Bachelor of Science. Bachelor of Science degree in Equine Science. God, I was having to think a little bit there, but so I've had my jockey license for the last 8 years, and I've rode over jumps. I've rode at Cheltenham Festival, the Aintree Festival, and fingers crossed we can bag a winner at either of those in the next coming weeks. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For what it's worth, Sky Sports Racing recently did a piece with Charlotte Jones. You can find it on our digital platforms. And it was really interesting. I knew a little bit about Charlotte, but nowhere near that much. Learned plenty about her, but also her dedication to the sport, what she's putting in, some of her thoughts. Yeah, really fascinating. I really enjoyed that, Charlotte. So it's nice to be able to tell you that face to face almost. Guys, let's get started. Kate, I'm going to start with you by asking you, sort of, as you touched upon in your bio, a more slightly broader question, but what barriers do women face, whether it's real and perceived, in horse racing, and how does that compare more broadly to kind of society and, I suppose, sport compared to horse racing?
So I think it's safe to say that the barriers that women face in horse racing bear lots of similarities to women working in all other sectors. In particular, different types of kind of segregation of jobs. And also, I think really key is the fact that even in really what we would call feminized industries, so industries where there's a lot of women working, and we would nowadays start to include horse racing as in that. There are lots of women within the workforce, but it's kind of triangle in terms of leadership. So the leadership, senior management, would be much higher proportion of men in those roles. That's fairly typical across a lot of sectors. It is very particular in horse racing and in other sports. I mean, there are numerous kind of reasons for that, sort of stereotyping of women, an expectation of them to be good in certain roles. Those roles often don't have so much merit attached to them. They're seen as kind of the easier, sort of fluffier roles, those sorts of things. So those are kind of the attitudes, but there's also structural barriers. So childcare being a huge one. And also when we talk about structural barriers, we're also talking about things, very simple things like sort of equipment that you might work with, training facilities and all of those different things. So the short answer being that this happens in all sectors, but it happens in a very specific way in sport and of course in horse racing, if that's useful for starting off.
Yeah, absolutely. It is useful. And it's kind of, I was thinking about it on the way up here, and I'll be on Sky later and they'll ask me about being a woman in racing and all of that. And I think it's, as you've touched upon there, broadly pretty comparable to, as you say, other sports, entertainment industries, TV in other areas as well. Elena, can you tell us a little bit about your PhD and sort of whether what Kate said there reflects in the research you've found with your PhD?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, absolutely agree with everything Kate just said. My PhD research was primarily, wasn't supposed to be gendered to start with. Education and training is my background. And basically what came out of my PhD, and I should also just probably highlight to start with that, it's really important these conversations are had, and that we don't opt out of them, because often we choose to not talk about things because they can be uncomfortable, or they don't reflect everybody's experience. And in summary, what my PhD basically said was, in horse racing, we have an identity, a racing identity, and that can be translated, as Kate said, into other sporting arenas and other industries. But in racing, we have a set of behaviours, a way we dress, the way we talk, and people basically were moulding themselves in order to fit in. So there was behaviours coming out that they wouldn't demonstrate or see in any other circumstance, but when they're in horse racing, there was things that were acceptable. There was language being used that was acceptable, because there seems to be this ultimate desire to fit in, because anything outside of that is considered other. And obviously horse racing is a phenomenal sport. We want to be in it. People are really keen to exist in it, but it's at cost. And that cost might be not having children, or maybe having children and deciding to leave the workforce. Or it could be relationships, it could be, behaviours. So I'm really keen that we do understand this racing identity, that we start to accept the other consciously, you know, with my diversity and racing hat on as well, it also spreads into that space outside of the women conversation as well. But we have to lean in, even though it's not comfortable, and we have to admit some pretty uncomfortable truths at times. And it is for the benefit of the sport. So this is about long-term sustainability. You know, we all want this sport to go on. We all want this to be a great place to work, but we have to have these conversations in order to make positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're here today and want to continue that as well. Charlotte, I think it's an interesting one from your point of view as a jockey, because obviously that's very different to a conversation, for example, in and around like a more senior management role. But you can only speak from where you sit. And obviously, you know, things are going really well for you. I feel like you have been given plenty of opportunities. Can you just talk to us about your experience to get to where you are now and what barriers you may have had to overcome, if any?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's tough. It's professional sport, so I'm a jockey. If I was a footballer, if I was a runner, no matter what I did, obviously you're competing at a high level, and not just that, the sport is dangerous. What we do, we're travelling at 30 and 40 mile an hour, jumping 5-foot fences. It isn't for the weak-hearted, the weak-minded, and I think that's important to be acknowledged, because it shouldn't be turned that way just because it's becoming more popular for more women. I think you still need to have a certain set of characteristics, a certain mindset, and ability to be able to get on and do the things we do. However, it is a male-dominated sport. I am very aware of that, and I'm fighting the women's corner every single day I ride. Every single day I ride, every time I go to the races, I'm always making sure, as much as I can, that we're heard in any way possible. Like, and not to be banging the women's drum all the time, because I just want equality, but and opportunities more than anything. Obviously, the work that Holly Doyle has done on the flat and Rachel Blackmore over jumps have brought absolute wonders to us as women, and they've been doing like massive things for us, and that just shows that we can only keep going and we can do the same things the men can do if we're given the opportunities. And for me, it's the opportunities that just aren't there. But obviously, like you say, recently I have been picking up more opportunities, which is great, and I feel like it's paying off as a result. The horses are running well for me, so again, I can't complain at that. But there's a long way to go.
Yeah, that's funny that you've just wrapped up that with there's a long way to go, because again, I was kind of, you know, you sort of think about what you'll have to say on Sky a little bit later when they come to you and ask about it. And that was actually my sort of like last line would have been, you know, we've come a fair way, but it still feels like we're a long way off any sort of finish line. Is that a fair statement, Eileen? You've already touched upon the fact that you've obviously been in this industry for a long time in different guises as well. But is that a fair summary, I think?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we have to recognize how far we've come, and we don't often do that, you know, and with the great work Kate and Eleanor are doing in the research, and Charlotte being such an amazing ambassador for the sport, this is really important to recognize that. But, you know, we do have a long way to come. It's still not an equitable industry by any means. You know, I've worked in lots of different areas of it, and I see a lot of issues with the culture in those areas that I've worked. But I do have to say, with my judge's hat on for the Thoroughbred Industry Employee Awards, obviously reading through those nominations, they're coming from employers who are encouraging and inclusive, because they want to appreciate and they want their staff to be seen. So I'm reading, you know, a lot of fantastic nominations, but I'm not really seeing the whole picture, you know, and you have to take a holistic view of this industry. But so I really do, I get to see some amazing and read some amazing stories and meet amazing people. And I know Eleanor was involved with one of the ladies that actually won the community award, Lauren Semple. So, and it's fantastic. But again, you know, I don't think that is giving us the whole picture. And, you know, we're so grateful to the employers that do put these people forward. But unfortunately, we hear things like, please don't ring us again when we, we're not going to nominate. And, and that's, as Eleanor said, we have to be honest and open about these things. And there's question marks on the reasons why people would say that.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Eleanor, the theme today is to try and inspire as much as anything, for International Women's Day today. So maybe let's move on to sort of, just that, inspiring. Can you update us on your recent diversity and racing steering group changes and what this means and what direction that's going in?
Yeah, of course. So the Diversity in Racing Steering Group has been remoulded into the Diversity in Racing Advisory Group. So we are now into an advisory capacity and there to support with development and guidance for stakeholders in the horse racing industry. So if you've got any questions or there's something you want to deliver and you're not quite sure, the committee is made up of phenomenal people that are experts in their field. So that's been one change. The secondary change is that we are also developing a strategy. So there will be a strategy for diversity within horse racing, and there will be a level of accountability because we will be feeding into the Industry People Board, which is obviously, again, another massive positive change, but also will be assisting with the development of the people strategy, because diversity is going to be, and inclusion is an enabler for an awful lot of their pillars. So again, it's now being considered as a key part of what horse racing is going forward. The Linda, Di, Rose will be accountable. They're going to be, have a seat at the table. They're the ones now asking the questions, having the conversations. And again, it really comes back to education and accountability at this stage. So yeah, it's been a welcome change and lots to do.
Yeah, lots to do seems to be the sort of underlying theme here. Kate, what about racing home? What research has been done to better understand that side of things? I know you've already touched upon racing home. Can you expand a little bit more?
Sure, yeah. So we ran the Racing Home research project over sort of during the COVID period. Actually, our first focus group was face-to-face, and then we had to go straight online pretty much. What we were able to do was to speak to people all across the industry. We did focus groups and we did one-to-one interviews. We spoke to people who had barely been in the sport a few months, right through to some of the most senior people in the sport who'd been here, been involved for many years, to get their feedback and opinions on what it was like to be a parent, primarily women, but we did involve some, men were invited as well. What it's like to be a parent within the industry, and what the kind of what works and also what the barriers are to success and to staying in the industry. We also spoke to a small number of people who'd had to leave at some stage. Some of them have come back, some of them, have not been able to because of things like childcare issues, etc. And as a result of that research, we were able to really put on for the first time people's real lived experience of trying to parent and to stay in the industry and to be successful in the industry. I talked earlier about structural barriers and some of the attitudinal barriers, and we were able to really get for the first time really get on down on paper with backing from people all across the industry as to what some of those were. What we were also keen to do was to identify what would help, what could bring about change, one of the things that did come about was a lack of knowledge of some rights, so we've set up a portal, the Racing Home portal, which has lots of information for employers, employees, people who are self-employed, all sorts of stuff around legislation, all sorts of stuff around good practice, best practice, and other things that we've been able to share that we were that people were kind of asking for, some were really crying out for. So some really interesting stuff in there, and we're hoping also to expand and to go on and to speak to other women about different experiences during the career life cycle, if you like, at a later stage.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot of information available out there. A link has just actually been shared in our chat as well for anyone who wants to link through to the portal Kate's just mentioned. Charlotte, slight change of sort of direction just for a moment. I know you've dropped off vision-wise, but I hope you're still there audio-wise. I just wanted, again, sort of pondering this and, you know, thinking in and around International Women's Day. From, you know, you're a relatively young female in the sport. In terms of trying to get more women into the sport in a professional capacity, I was thinking that, you know, they fundamentally they have to in some way want to be involved in horse racing, and so that goes back a step towards just creating female fans, women, to enjoy racing. You know, you're racing every day, and you touched upon it already being, you know, you've already said it's a male dominated sport, and that goes right back to the fan base as well. Do you think we do enough as a sport to try and include women just at that fan base level? Do we do enough in that department, do you think?
I mean, I think at the fan base level, there are lots of positive things, such as obviously like Aintree having like a ladies' day, and you'll see like best dress competitions and things like that. I think that's really, really good to try and get more women involved in the sport from a fan base level. But in terms of promoting women to work in the sport and to kind of have ambition to come to the top of the sport and to be heavily involved from a riding perspective, for definite. I mean, I don't think there's enough done at all. I think there's probably about 10 professional jump jockeys that are females that I can think of, and I just don't think that's good enough, to be honest. And like, I'm not sure what the reasons are. I don't know why people enter the sport wanting to be a jockey, and for some reason they don't fulfill that. And I get it. It's brilliant because it means that, you know, it's a real select number, and it you know, it kind of shows that the ones who are doing it, it's like, wow, well, you know, you're one of few. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But at the same time, in comparison to the males who are doing it, I just kind of think, why? What sort of stops us females being able to push them boundaries in comparison to the men?
Yeah, I think, Eileen, definitely, I agree with what Charlotte said there, and I personally just feel that there's a gap. Obviously, Women in Racing is doing a huge bit to try and bridge the gap between potentially somebody who has an interest in racing, whether it be to be a jockey or to work in racing, to work at a race course, whatever it might be, somebody who just has that base level interest to then cut through to actually making a career out of horse racing. Do you think there's more that can be done to bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, Charlotte is the expert in her field, but what I'm seeing is the people that are coming in, our profile of the grassroots people coming into this industry, I do love horses. That is what starts their love affair with racing. You know, they were either involved with horses as a youngster or just liked animals, but you'll always find, oh, granddad had a pony, or you'll always find that little link. And that's where the passion starts. You know, that's where I see a lot of the grassroots coming in. But then it's like the old adage of we hire and ignore. So, you know, we're quite good at that. We don't make the workplace a safe environment for them. We don't give any sort of mentoring or coaching. You know, we don't have a lot of the farms. They don't have a HR department. So, you know, Racing Home was such a brilliant initiative. It was amazing, and thank you, Kate, for all your work on it. You know, I even used it myself as an employer. And that's what we need. We need more sort of encouragement that these girls that are coming in at low levels are welcomed and wanted in this industry. And it's not a difficult ask, and it's not a difficult thing to do, and it's industry critical, because we can't retain staff, you know, and we can't staff. You know, I'm an employer. I've been an employer in this industry for over 20 years. And it's really, really upsetting to see, you know, really brilliant people and we're losing them. And, you know, ladies, obviously we're talking about women, but it happens, you know, with men as well. But certainly for what we're talking about today, things could be better. But, you know, I don't want to be too negative, and there are things been done, but things could be better. And I think, you know, we have this responsibility to encourage these people coming into the industry from a grassroots level, which is the level that I'm, you know, really interested in, who have the passion there and the want, and we have responsibility to look after them, and we're not doing that.
Do you concur with those thoughts with your research, Kate? Do you agree with what Eileen said there in terms of that, you know, we're not looking after them enough once we get them into a base level role?
I absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think shocked some of us from an early stage was the number of young women that we spoke to who already had decided that they were going to leave at a certain point, not because they didn't, you know, they loved the sport. They were already heartbroken about having to make that decision, and they weren't going to go yet, but at some point they were going to go, and they knew it because it was the kind of mantra. You know, you can't have a family and be in this sport. You can't, you know, you can't stay in here long term if you're a woman. And it was, you know, that I wouldn't say that was every single woman we'd spoken to, younger woman we'd spoken to, but it was a real theme running right across the industry. This kind of expectation that sometime it would all have to come to an end sooner rather than later, and that was a real theme. And also, as I said, we spoke with women that had kind of had to leave, and because they couldn't manage family and the demands of the job, some of which would have been things like flexible working or being able to stop and pick up the kids and, you know, come back or whatever, that things that could have been worked around their role. But it didn't happen, and they left, and many were absolutely, you know, would love to come back, would love to. And I know from subsequent work that that's the case, that there are women that would come back at the drop of a hat if they could fit it somewhere around family commitment. So absolutely, Eileen, absolutely.
And Eleanor, in your sort of Scottish Racing Academy CEO role, trying to educate obviously the next generation, looking at the younger people coming through, that sort of feedback must be, dare I say, pretty depressing to hear. That must be something you're very keen to change for the future.
Yeah, no, I'm so pleased that Eileen's just been that honest, actually, and been that frank, because it's something that, you know, we're so worried about always talking about the bad things, but actually we absolutely have to acknowledge that we are recruiting hard, but we're not creating necessarily an opportunity or space for women. And it's not all women, but I think it's a lot of women to thrive. And, you know, it's things like language. Language is a massive part to play in this. So, you know, we always talk about racing as a lifestyle. What we're actually saying when we say racing as a lifestyle is racing should come before everything else, reinforcing what Kate's just said, that actually you're already thinking, I can't have, you know, a family when let's be real, the economy needs women to be having children. If we all stopped having children, we'd be in a very, very tricky place. So what we're actually saying by, you know, talking about that racing as a lifestyle is we're saying it should be your whole life. And anything that deviates from that is a challenge to your commitment. And we are so obsessed with commitment in racing, you know, it should be everything, that we're shrinking where a woman can operate within that space. And then I suppose the other piece of that is advocating, because we also have equipment issues. You know yourself, when you're menstruating, our weight fluctuates up to 5 pounds. You know, obviously I've never been a jockey, I wasn't brave enough or good enough. But, you know, I've spoken to a lot of women jockeys who actually had never been able to vocalise that, because it is a limitation. So they've had to make adaptations to their preparation. Now that could be chemical alteration through contraception, but it also could be through, you know, exercise and diet, which isn't always the healthiest of choices. We also talk about, you know, white breeches, and you know, British dressage has made a massive effort. Show jumping's made a massive effort. You know, this conversation is starting in racing, but we really need women to be advocating for all women, because it doesn't affect all women. But actually, if we've got pony racers coming through, you know, think about period shame. Periods are embarrassing to talk about to a point. You know, you get to 18, 19, 20, you know, you happily talk about periods. But actually, when you're 15, 14, 16, 17, telling your boss that actually your boobs are really sore and you're struggling to get your body protector over them, or actually, you know, your britches are a bit tight, or, you know, you're struggling with your weight, you know, we don't open up the door to that conversation, because we either assume people are happy to talk about it, or B, we assume people don't want to talk about it. But actually, you know, this is all about choice. If we can create an opportunity for young women to wear dark, you know, breeches with dark patches, let's not even talk about dark breeches, because we're never going to get there, I don't think. Or maybe we will, but not anytime soon, because we're so hung up on tradition. And we have to have, you know, this is why this conversation is brilliant, is because there's female leaders that can now advocate for women in the future, but we have to be brave enough to have it. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, absolutely. I think Charlotte might have to go soon, but just before I say goodbye to Charlotte, I just wanted to ask her if anything of what Ellena's just said there, Charlotte, resonated with you in your career and what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, Elena is exactly right. I mean, obviously, we as a woman, we are different to men. Natural things like periods and things like that, you can't control. I mean, for me, I'm a bit of a freak in a way. I'm really naturally quite light, and I don't really suffer with my period. So any weight gain I welcome it. So I'm not one who's on the scales all the time. However, I imagine some of the other girls who are obviously struggling to do bottom weight and things, like a £5 increase just because you're on your period. I mean, I know enough to know that that's a lot. That is a lot in terms of racing when it comes to, you know, if you put £5 on just because you're on your period, that's, you know, we can't help that kind of thing. But where are the solutions? Where do the solutions kind of lie with that? Would you get a weight allowance just when you're on your period? But then it's kind of like announcing, oh, everybody, I'm on my period, so I'm getting an allowance today, kind of thing. Then where's the dignity in that as well? So I'm not sure what the answers would be from that perspective. Obviously, Elena might have more on that in terms of her research, and obviously she will have spoken to a lot more female jockeys who could probably be more helpful than me in that area, purely just because I don't struggle my weight. But again, it is things to take into consideration, and things like having like sanitary bins and just access to tampons and things like that. Like as a race courses surely should provide them kind of things, and in like the stable staff canteens, the stable staff accommodation, that kind of stuff, they need to be paramount really. But whether or not that is the case, I think it is improving. However, yeah, like I said before, that there is a long way to go. And just quickly, sort of in reply to Jane's question, which I don't know whether that's there, she'd said, does Charlotte feel that changes to the weighing rooms, etc., has been beneficial to encouraging more women jockeys? I think the changes that have been made to the weighing rooms are very beneficial to us women. However, there is still further to go, and we will keep sort of stamping our feet. I don't think anything has purposely been done to us because we are women. I think a lot of it has just been designed by men, and due to limiting numbers of women, we've sort of been unable to have a voice and been unable to be like, well, no, actually, we need this, we want equality here, we want equality there. I think we have never really had anybody shouting from the rooftops in those kind of areas to make sure the things like the weighing rooms are as equal as possible. So, but again, now we've kind of got steering groups in place. The PJA are working very, very hard in terms of the PJA at the moment to make sure our facilities are on the up. But again, these are not things that can happen overnight, but it's getting there.
It is. The wheels are slowly turning, Charlotte. I'm going to let you go because I am aware that I think you've arrived at a race course now. And so we will say goodbye to you, but thank you very much for your contribution. We'll let you just slide off and continue the conversation. Jane saying, thanks, Charlotte, for answering that question as well. We're getting a few comments, which we might have an opportunity to read out, but let's just plow on with the discussion. Eileen, let's, again, trying to focus in on some of the positives. How important is it to support young people as they come up through the industry at all career stages? Obviously, you're talking about the sort of grassroots level and that lack of support on the way up. But just to sort of expand more on why that's so important, really, not just to kind of get them in. And as you said earlier, what was it? Employ and abandon, or whatever you called.
Ignore.
Ignore, that's it. I mean, again, a little depressing, but yeah, just an expansion on that for the sort of more, people coming in, as you say, and that younger guys.
Yeah. Well, Eleanor mentioned a word there earlier that gives me goosebumps every time I hear it in this industry, and that's tradition. And it blocks a lot of things for us, a lot of things. And, so for me, the whole, the supporting young people does go up to a level, but it doesn't go to the level it should be going to, because unfortunately they're untouchable. So I think it's even more important. What I'm saying is the leadership and management sometimes, and the boards, they're not listening, and they're stuck in tradition. So I think it's really important, the young people, first of all, that are coming into the industry, if we can mentor them and coach them, empower them, give them a voice, tell them what the industry, how we want it to look like, the inclusivity, the equitable industry. And then the people that are in roles now that we can touch. So I'm making that quite clear, because we can't, unfortunately, we can't get to everybody. But the people that are in management roles that we can touch, we need guidance for them. We need coaching, mentoring in whatever shape or form. So it's a holistic kind of upstream view. So what I'm looking at is the leaders for the future, and the board members for the future, and getting them empowered now, and and through coaching in the workplace, and making sure that they feel encouraged, supported, and empowered to have a voice, which is really important for women in this industry. So again, it's a tough one, because of the tradition that we're up against, and the structure, because it's such a complex structure in this industry. I mean, I don't know any other industry that has so many different facets to it. Decisions are slow. Oh, it's, I need to mute myself now, because I'm going to start. But but that's so I just think you have to do what you can do and get to the people you can get to. And that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, Kate, I think you were nodding and agreeing there in regards to the sort of different facets of the industry. Was that your reaction there?
Absolutely. I mean, I've worked across several sectors, healthcare and education and finance and all sorts. And I've never known anything quite as complex as the structures that you have in
wow.
In horse racing. But I mean, I would say that within that there's a real kind of opportunity to we're talking about mentoring, and Eileen mentioned mentoring. I think a recognition that being able to understand and negotiate some of those complexities, and knowing a bit more about who's who and who does what, that's a really good opportunity within a mentoring relationship, because so many people that have answered the surveys that we've done, and also we spoke to, said, it wasn't till I started to get to know who was who that I really understood, where I could go in this industry, etc. So it is extremely complex, and that does slow down decision making and change, but it also offers lots of opportunities and lots of kind of niche areas where people can thrive. But I think mentoring relationships and kind of advocating for one another and those sorts of things, I think that's extra important, but it does offer that opportunity.
Eleanor, one thing I wanted to ask you about, just in terms of your own experiences in racing, the research you've been doing as well. One thing that I'm sure comes up quite a lot is the sort of idea of imposter syndrome, which women seem to feel, specifically in this sport, particularly more than men. Is that something that you have been faced with either yourself or in your research you've noticed as well? Does that get brought up quite a lot? It's something that I certainly felt in the early part of my career.
I am yet to meet a woman that has never had or faced or felt imposter syndrome on some capacity. Like, there's some days that I even now go into meetings and I think, I have no idea while I'm sat here, or actually, the merits, my experience, the knowledge I've got, I absolutely do bring something, but I still sit there thinking I'm going to get rumbled in a minute, or someone's going to ask me a question I can't answer, or, I'm always over prepared for everything, for fear. So I think it's alive, and I think it's well, and I've just seen Dina there mention something about culture as well, and I do think it's a cultural thing that our sport as a woman, so women in our sport, going back to racing identity, have developed a set of characteristics and skills that can actually not be positive for other women, because they've learned a set of language, they've learned a set of behaviours that maybe reinforce things that we're trying, even with this conversation, to stamp out or remove or reduce. And to be fair, a lot, I think, of things we've talked about this morning is also linked to people not necessarily being aware of these things. And as soon as you make people aware of them, generally it stops or changes. So, if I said, actually, I was really nervous coming into this room because this person was in it, or actually last time you mansplained to me, or you spread out, or whatever that might look like, 9 times out of 10 they'd be mortified, apologise, not recognise they were doing it. And again, which comes back to the importance exactly of leaning into these conversations. We have to just be saying, actually, that's not okay. And then once you know what people know, you can understand intention a little bit better. And I think once we get to that point, we're in a real good place. And just going to Charlotte's point before about sanitary bins, that was something that came up a lot during my research, was that, sanitary bins weren't being put out. And again, I think if you peel it right back, the person who has probably dropped those sanitary bins in the foyer or wherever they've gone, and the person that then is going to put them out is probably a male. And of course, he's never had to use a sanitary bin, so has no appreciation of the importance of that sanitary bin or how much it's going to be missed by that woman. And I think if you just informed them that actually that sanitary bin is a really integral and important part of that female's comfort for the rest of the day, it'll then be prioritised again. But I don't think we can assume that people understand and know things. So again, it comes back to this leaning into the conversation, informing people, and then we can understand intention. If the intention is wrong, then you can address it in a different way. But actually, if it's, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
Generally, we're in a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. It's like it's a lack of knowledge as much as anything. Like you say, it's probably very few who have any sort of, intent to make someone feel uncomfortable or unhelped or whatever it might be. It's a lot of the time a lack of knowledge. I've witnessed that. Let's try finish on some positive chat, because there are positive changes happening. Women in racing in particular driving in the right direction, of course. Eileen, should we talk about the bursary scheme? Because, of course, I mentioned at the top that is something that I have benefited from myself. A good few years ago, I received a bursary from Women in Racing very, very generously. It helped fund essentially a presenting course in London, which at the time I wouldn't have been able to afford on my own. No way. They're quite expensive if you want to do them properly. It was a 3-day course in London. And at the time, I felt like I really needed a course and I wouldn't have been able to afford it without the bursary that Women in Racing provided. So, you know, I look back and I've often said how grateful I am for that, because it just gave me that confidence. It wasn't that the next week or the next month, or even I don't think the next year, I got some sort of on-screen opportunity, but it meant that when the opportunity did come my way, when I put myself in the right position, I'd had that, you know, it doesn't sound like a lot when you do 3 days in front of a screen with someone one-on-one telling you what you're doing right and wrong. It really sticks with you. It really stuck with me. And it meant that when I did go live, you know, still today, right today, when I'm on air later, I will think of things, I will, you know, genuinely have in my mind things that I learned all the way back then. So it was so beneficial to my career and very, very helpful. And of course, that bursary scheme is still in place, Eileen, still helping people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go back slightly to the point that Eleanor brought up about imposter syndrome, what she was talking about. And obviously for myself, coming from a non-racing family, you know, growing up in a city, I mean, I had imposter syndrome tattooed all over me when I came. So I know very, very well what that feels like. But I also know that meeting Women in Racing and having a mentor. So I was a mentee first with Sally Rowley-Williams and also Simone Sear. So I had 2 mentors that really helped me, you know, to be aware of feeling like an imposter, and it gave me some empowerment, you know, going into committees and putting myself forward. So that was amazing. And it changed me completely. From the mentoring, I went on to do some leadership coaching, and then I did my bronze coaching award also in qualification. So that was brilliant. Then the chance for me to come and do some more education came along, and I just needed that little bit of help financially. So that's when the bursary helped me out. But it allowed me to focus, the bursary allowed me to focus on the part of the industry that we've been talking about today that's been overlooked, in my opinion, you know, the encouragement and coaching of the people coming up through the ranks from the grassroots all the way up. So that bursary has allowed me now to continue my studies, and I'm going into year 4 of my psychology diploma, which has been amazing and really helpful. And it's already made an impact, because I have a coaching business, and I'm speaking to you know, management at the National Stud and have coachees there. So I'm just can't tell you how thrilled I was to get the bursary and how important it's been for me.
Yeah, fascinating. And it's so nice to hear about how that bursary has helped, like so many of us, just 2 people on this webinar alone, and how many more people I'm sure it will help going forward in the future. Kate, again, trying to, you know, wrap up the positives here, I did want to give you an opportunity to mention the Return to Riding Rehab program that's been a very positive development as part of Racing Home.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've talked a lot about young people coming through, which is so important. But I think also, as has been said a couple of times, there are people within the industry that we were kind of that are further along in their careers, and we would want to retain them. So at this stage, we've run a successful pilot around the rehab, and I believe we're recruiting for another kind of for another program. But it's certainly it kind of feeds into one of the themes that really came out of our research and sort of discussions around Racing Home in general, and that we've got already people who you know, highly skilled people who love the industry, and for want of some support at certain times in their sort of working lives, need to leave. The rehab program is one of those aspects, but I think also I'll give a shout out to my colleague Dana Meller, with whom I've been working, who's done some amazing work around getting women sort of back into racing in various ways. But I think that you know, the kind of the bringing on of young people, and then the nurturing, and then helping them to stay in the industry, I think that's just so important. So and the there's just so much positive work going on now around that, and hopefully room for more.
Absolutely. Look, guys, we've already run 5 minutes over, and in my head I was like, oh, I'll go to Eleanor about this and I'll go back to Eileen about that. But it's always the case that these discussions could go on and on and on. But we will have to wrap up. Look, Eileen, Kate, and Eleanor, thank you so much for your time and for your contributions here. There's loads of information and links in the webinar chat. Women in Racing have just been firing in plenty of links, mainly over to the Women in Racing website, but that's where you can find out about all sorts, including the bursary scheme, but also the mentor scheme. And there's a new mentor announcement that coming very shortly from Women in Racing. So do get in touch and apply via the form on the website if you'd like to find out more. There will be more information in the meantime. And of course, sign up to all the Women in Racing digital platforms, social media platforms, so you don't miss anything. As I said, could continue talking to you guys, and I feel like as we sort of started and concluded, we've come a way, but there is still a long way to go. But you guys on this panel and other people as well are really pushing in the right direction. And from myself as a woman in racing, I can genuinely thank you all for your hard work, because you know, we're all on the same team, but it takes people like you guys to row forward in the fashion that you are. And I know it can probably feel like an uphill battle sometimes, but we really do appreciate you. So thank you very much. Everyone out there, I hope you've enjoyed that. Please do get in contact with any of us if you have any questions. I personally am very happy to answer any questions. I'm sure everyone else on this panel will be as well. But for now, thank you very much for joining us.